Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast, where leadership meets entertainment. I'm Kristin, and as always, I'm joined by the man who's seen more dirty leadership than a Netflix drama, Ron Ward. Ron, how are we doing today?
I am just groovy, Kristin.
That dates you.
I'm bringing groovy back.
Okay, got it.
Anyway,
that's
I'm
like
excited.
Me with Rad. Yeah, you're
Let's
excited?
bring Rad back, groovy and Rad. I like it.
I know, right? I think it's excellent. Okay, Ron, I shared a story with Ron before we started recording, and he said, you have to put that in today's episode. So I thought I would share with you guys a wild situation that I experienced over the weekend. And I'm gonna make it as short as possible. But you wanna preface it, Ron? Like what was your favorite?
Here's the thing. We're just chatting. We're catching up. And she starts telling me the story. And I said, you got to stop. I think has nothing to do with the podcast episode, but I think you guys will enjoy it.
And Ron hasn't even heard the whole thing. So
I love a good story. So anyway, Kristin, you just got back from vacation,
yes.
So forth, so on, but you had a little incident.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
Okay. So my aunt lives right on the Washington State, Canada border. And it's a beautiful community up there, Blaine, Washington, Birch Bay, Washington area, for those familiar. So we're there for 4 nights. And on the 4th day, and we had no plans to go into Canada, by the way. But on the 4th day, my kids really wanted to, they call it unlocking a new state. When we go into a new state, they really want to hit all 50. They want to hit some new countries. So my son especially is like, I want to unlock Canada. And we're like, okay, well, we didn't bring our passports, but my mom's like, there's Peace Arch Park right there. And you can walk in and out of Canada without a passport, right? So we would unlock Canada. Well, my mom and my aunt went ahead of us in a separate vehicle. And I said, I'll just meet you there. Let me put it in my GPS. Should be pretty simple, right? Never been there before. Long story short, I get in the wrong lane. Basically took the wrong turn, and I end up in line to go into Canada. Now, there was a turnaround option, but that was completely blockaded for whatever reason. I never got a clear answer on that. And I'm now finding myself in line to go into Canada. No passports, but it gets worse. I'll save the other piece here. So my mom's in the park, and there happens to be a Border Patrol agent right there. So she says, my daughter accidentally got in line to go into Canada. What should she do? She can't turn around. There's too many cars behind her, and it's a one-way situation. And he said, just let them know this was on accident, and they'll turn you around. So no big deal, right? So we get up there, and I tell the gentleman, the Border Patrol agent, I say, this was on accident. I don't want to come into your country. I'm just trying to turn around. You have this blockaded over here for whatever reason. He's like, no problem. We'll get you turned around. And then he said, but first, do you guys have any weapons or firearms on you? So I'm married to a law enforcement officer. And yeah, he had one on his hip. And this is Canada, okay? So anyone familiar, right, Ron? It's not a. They do not like.
You should have yelled out the window, "We hate tariffs." They would have. Go ahead.
I should have been like the 51st state. No.
Yeah, no.
Something. So I look over at my husband. I literally look over like, son of a bitch. So he's like, yes, I have one on my hip. And then the guy gets on the radio. He's like, we have a code. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. So then 4 Border Patrol agents come over. They made my husband get out of the car. Here he is, law enforcement, right? And we're in the United States up until this very point, and we're allowed to conceal carry. Fun fact, law enforcement officers can legally carry. It's a federal law. They can carry in all 50 states, concealed carry. Anyhow. So they put him up against this wall. There's a huge line of cars behind us getting a free show. He has American flag boxer shorts on. They lift his shirt up. A little bit of his boxers are showing. I just thought that was really a fun piece of it. And they take his weapon off of him. They're over there dinking around with it, trying to figure out how to take the magazine out. I thought that was humorous, actually. But they couldn't quite figure that out that fast. They get it all zip tied up, frisked him. So then they have us get back in the vehicle and drive over to this. My son's crying in the back, by the way, because this is freaky. That's freaky. So then we had to drive over. We all had to get out of the vehicle. They had to search the vehicle. We're sitting in Border Patrol, Customs, whatever area on the Canadian side. And this is a big deal. Like, we were literally, what were we considered like illegal at that point, Ron? Like illegal with a firearm?
Well, you didn't have a passport, so
Yeah.
yes, but I'm sure his credentials helped. But yeah,
Yes, they did collect that. So I do think they were actually, I have to say, this is just a little piece of it, but they were very friendly. They could have been jerks. They were not. And so actually, when we talked to the U.S. Border Patrol agents, they were like, "Ugh, how'd Canada treat you?" And I'm like, actually, they were very nice. Like, no one was overly aggressive or anything towards us. So I want to give them credit there. It was not a negative experience as far as their behavior was concerned. So we get over, and it took about 10, 15 minutes. We had to go up. They had to go search. They had to do a full background on all of us, even my children. They end up clearing us to go get back in our vehicle. They searched the vehicle, didn't find anything. We were able to go back into the line to go through the U.S. border now. So, and the line was about an hour and a half.
Oh,
So we were just sitting there. Yes. And so this whole time, we're now in line with everyone on a Sunday evening trying to get back into the United States, right? I at least thought once we would get to that point, it would just be smooth sailing. But no. So we finally get up to the U.S. Border Patrol guy. And he's like, we tell him the situation, and he goes, all right. And I will say the U.S. person was not as friendly. So they're dealing with, I think a lot more people are trying to come into the U.S. than Canada, quite frankly. So he sends us back over, basically what we did on the Canadian side. Now on the U.S. side, he sends us back over into a holding cell. We have to get out of the vehicle, have all the windows rolled down. We have to go into the U.S. side for customs. And that side had hundreds of people in it in line. And we walk in, and the guy goes, "Go get in line." He was so rude, couldn't even make eye contact with us. And the line was insanely long. Thankfully, we were pulled out of line after waiting for like 15 minutes and put into this U.S. citizen line, because we were like the only U.S. citizens in there. So we get up there and we get a nice guy, and he was really cool and good jovial personality. And after about 45 minutes in there, they had to search the vehicle again. We were able to go. Here's what I thought was really funny though. So not only do we have a souvenir of a U.S. Customs, or excuse me, a Canadian Border Patrol bag, like evidence bag. So now we have that because that's what they stuck the gun in. But they also, the U.S. Border Patrol guy, he was funny. He goes, "I gave you a little souvenir." And in that bag is a patch, like how police officers, it's a U.S. Border Patrol patch. I thought it was pretty.
so cool. You told me a badge earlier offline. That's what
Oh,
threw
did
me
I
off.
say badge? I'm sorry.
You said
patch.
That's
You're like,
why
why
I
would
was
he
so,
do that?
yes, people collect patches and
Patches,
challenge coins.
Yes.
But,
Yeah. So it was a patch.
That makes more
Sorry.
sense.
I know. You're like, why would he give his whole badge? That's weird. But no, patch. It was a patch. So I thought that was pretty funny, actually. And my husband, it took us, I'm not even kidding, this whole situation, it was like our rights were stripped away from us for 3 hours. It felt really icky. I'll just tell you that, especially for someone who's usually, the police officer who's usually the one frisking people, to be frisked and to have your weapon taken off of you. I never did. Here's what I think. Let me just bring it back to a leadership standpoint. When, people make mistakes all the time, they kept telling us this happens like every hour. Okay, if it happens every hour, why do you have your turnaround option closed? Like if people accidentally, and they were telling us how the signage is really confusing, because I'm the one who made the mistake and drove it over there. But, I felt like writing them because I should, right, Ron? Because there's the signage, there's a huge sign and it says Peace Arch Park. Well, it should say stop, do not enter unless you're trying to come over into Canada.
Right.
It's not the park. This is the actual border to get into Canada.
Look, you're great at printing. Just make the sign go over there with a hammer. And
I know. I should put it up.
Just improve
And
the
they told me
signage.
there was an elderly couple in front of us that had just done the same thing. They didn't have a weapon on them, but they accidentally did the same thing. And they were they were in their 80s. And the fact that the turnaround, I finally asked the nice guy at the end, why is that turnaround closed? And he said, oh, because so many people were going the wrong way onto the freeway. We just closed it off. And I'm like, okay. I mean, sounds like that's a personal problem for so many people taking the exit wrong. But, to not have an option to turn around once you're in line, Ron, this one's going to chap my hide for a while.
Take a breath, Kristin.
I'm pissed.
Folks, thank you all for letting Kristin vent and get some therapy.
That was therapy. I have PTSD from that.
I would like to provide my takeaways. I'd like to provide my takeaways from the story. Number one,
by all means,
I want some of those red, white, and blue boxer shorts, underwear. That's
Old Navy,
number
baby.
one. No, I tell people all the time, you got to be careful with customs and when you're traveling. And we did have an officer who got pickpocketed in, I think it was either London or France. I can't remember. And we had to go through the whole, because her credentials were in there. So you got a U.S. badge,
Yeah.
So that was a big deal. But yeah, you got to always know the rules, folks, if you're going through customs. And don't ride with Kristin is my other takeaway, especially if you're near a border somewhere.
Oh,
no, I told her
gosh.
I had spent a little bit of time with the the Canadian Mountie Police. And it was just good times. Very, very nice and cool. Well, Kristin, thank you for sharing. That really is a cool, that's a cool story. I'm the one that, asked her to share that. I thought you guys would enjoy it, but we're going to zip through something that is a phenomenon that's relatively new. And we wanted to talk about it a little bit because I've never heard anybody look at it from a leadership standpoint.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about today is how pod bros changed the political landscape in America. And of course, what we can learn from that. Mm-hmm. So we're diving in. It involves power, influence, and a narrative that came out during a very unique time. And it's how a few mic'd up men, a lot of them smoking cigars, having drinks, sometimes coffee, but a lot of times having mixed drinks. Some are even, smoking pot, I think. But they flipped the American political script. And we're talking about, they've been called pod bros from podcasts. Mm-hmm. And of course, there were some very influential women, but we are delving in because there's been such a label of pod bros. That's primarily what we're going to focus on. Yeah,
no, I think it's in due time, right? Like, I'm glad we're covering this now because we're seeing this more than ever. These are the loud, unapologetic, often polarizing podcast hosts who turned microphones into megaphones, quite frankly. And they're shifting elections, swaying public opinion, and creating very loyal followings that rival political parties.
Yeah, and one of my first definition of leadership is you got to have followers. So you can love these guys or hate them. They know how to lead. They know how to influence. And it's not the traditional leadership. They really embarked on a new venue, a new way to express yourself. It's real, it's raw, and it's working.
It is. And, many of them, this is like a basement hobby, right? That's how it started out. And now these guys are shaping, like I said, voter turnout, fundraising efforts, even political appointments. So they've taken their ability to command attention and turned it into influence. And really, no political experience is necessary whatsoever.
No, it's true. And we've mentioned Joe Rogan before, and you have to because his JRE podcast is number one. But I heard him on an interview saying he and a friend just kind of wanted to chat. They liked the concept of podcasts, and he started doing it. And the popularity, to say exponential growth is almost an understatement. Right. It just took off. But Joe had a unique ability of getting unique guests, listening, responding, and so forth. But as we saw the landscape start to change, even with him, he began to see so many policies that he disagreed with that he started having more political guests. And that was a very unique development. We'll talk more about it in a minute. But then you've got these comedians, and Joe Rogan is a comedian. A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
And so that's his inner circle. He loves comedians. He loves jujitsu guys. That's who he gets feedback from most of the time. But then you got Theo Vaughn, who now, like everyone my daughter's age, everyone knows him. Andrew Schultz. And then you have others like Brandon Tatum. He's known as Officer Tatum.
Yeah.
And these guys didn't run for office. They ran the conversation. And in leadership, controlling the narrative is half of the game.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. Many of the comedians with the most influence were the ones who stood up against cancel culture, and they refused to be silenced. And one notable comedian, Shane Gillis, oh my gosh, like this is very, very recent. He was terminated from SNL before he even started due to some old comments. And yet, there were social media comments, and yet he's one of the top comedians in the business. He actually just hosted the ESPY Awards. I'm sure everyone has at least seen a snippet of that. And let's just say he did not hold back. It's amazing.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is he has such a landslide of supporters that there are some people trying to get him canceled over that, by the way. But there's no way that it's going to happen because the pendulum has swung. But
yeah,
let me take a break from our normal script, and I'm going to get your thoughts on this too, Kristin. But what happened was, and Kristin and I have been open about our disdain for the whole woke idealism and how it denied individuality, and it was bullying in a different form. So what happened is you had a few comedians who continued to just, badger everyone. And comedy is supposed to not be taken as the truth, but they just stayed true to it. And some of them almost did get canceled, but they just kept beating the drum. But I think what happened is so many people were sick of it that the comedians were the only voice they could tune into, except maybe some conservative influencers. But these comedy shows were like a connection to reality in a unique way. Yeah. So I think it almost made them more popular because people were crying out for their message. What do you think?
Oh, you're spot on. I mean, yeah, we get, the cancel culture movement, it represents such a small percentage of Americans, but a lot of times it's the people that have the stage, because it's the actors, the actresses, people that have that ability to get their message out to a large audience. But the majority of Americans actually did not appreciate this, and we're not on the same page. So once we feel represented, it's just so refreshing. So that's why you see people rallying behind this movement.
Yeah, and comedians have a reputation of just badgering all races, creed, religion, all of that. And, we had gone to a point where people wouldn't do that. So, and frankly, it wasn't really funny. So this is where the politics starts to come in. Many of the top podcasters began to interview the major political candidates and potential cabinet members. And the tide began to turn. We saw actually Trump went on Theo Vaughn, which is very unique. They talk more about addiction because Trump's brother, was an alcoholic and died. But JD Vance was on there, which JD seems to be able to talk to anybody. He's still got those Appalachian roots, as we call it.
He's awesome.
And Trump ends up on Joe Rogan. But apparently these podcasters say they attempted to get Kamala Harris and some of her potential waltz and so forth, and they declined. And Bernie Sanders, to his credit, go Bernie, he went on there. He went on Joe Rogan and I think Theo Vaughn. But this is something I found out, Kristin. You probably know this. You're politically astute. This, I'll tell you what, you take it. You're into politics. Who orchestrated this? This is a fun fact, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh, yes,
who orchestrated this?
Well, when it came to the 2024 election, to have President Trump go on these podcasts, it's Barron Trump, his youngest son. And actually, there's inside interviews into people that have worked with President Trump for many, decades. And actually, they say that Barron Trump is the closest to Donald Trump, President Trump, of any of his children. He is wired very similarly. So that's a really cool article to look up and read a bit about that. But so Barron convinced him. Is he Gen Z? Yeah, I think he would be Gen Z. Or is he?
He would be. No, I
Yeah,
think
he's Gen Z. Okay.
Yeah.
I forget how young he is. But yeah, so he was really the architect who persuaded his dad and others to make these appearances. And I think it's really interesting. We haven't talked about Jerry Seinfeld, but even Jerry Seinfeld, who really stays out of politics, he has spoken out against woke culture as well from a comedic standpoint. He's like, he thinks it's ridiculous. So I think it's really interesting. We need to pay attention to the fact that not everyone is represented by that movement.
Yeah, I was very concerned about free speech. And I know, Kristin, you were shadow banned and a lot of things happened. But there is, I don't want the pendulum to swing too far. I don't want anybody to be silenced. And we have to be careful, because that's what happens when you get in extremism. You go extreme the other way. So I hope that our culture, using the First Amendment, is balanced, but it is refreshing to be able to get some information from people that you can identify with. Now, is there misinformation? Of course there is. Do they have the resources that maybe a major news industry has? They don't. But what happened is people began to see these false stories from the legacy media, and trust is at an all-time low. So guess who filled the gap? It was podcasters.
Yes.
Anyway.
And, on that, when I was sitting in the Canadian Customs, they had the news on, and I was explaining to the kids, we were the only ones in there, so it wasn't like I had an audience, but I was explaining to the kids, and a lot of people don't realize this. So Canada passed a law, I think it was in 23, that they cannot, if you are a Canadian resident, you cannot get your news off of social media. So like my page, for instance, is because it does say news. You can't, if you're Canadian, you cannot watch most of my news hits. So it's really interesting. So for Canada, I talk about free speech and a concern there. They literally have to get their news from legacy media. Okay, they can't get it off.
You could change the name to News A. I don't know.
Yeah, A. Actually, now that I think about it, I recently, after I had some Canadian followers of mine send me screenshots on what they couldn't see on my page, and I believe I changed it from news. What did I have? News something on there, and I changed it to public figures for that very reason, so that people from other countries can see it actually. But yeah, it was pretty wild to see that. So it's important that we understand these things. Another significant development came from ousted news anchors and journalists, and you'll be familiar with these names. Two of the most significant are Tucker Carlson, of course, and Megyn Kelly. And though she's not smoking a cigar, she's not a pod bro, she is widely respected. And, another interesting trend started to develop. Nearly all of these major voices in podcasting are politically conservative. And I don't think that's just a coincidence.
Yeah. And what's interesting, most of them call themselves libertarians, but as it just seemed as more extremism started to poke its head out on the left, that it almost seemed to push these people toward the right, because a lot of them are the pro-marijuana, all of that stuff. But they became more and more conservative. So statistics showed that more people trust these pod bros than the legacy media. Think about it. Did you ever dream there would be a time that you would trust that somebody doing a podcast more than the news? But it's true.
Wild.
And they use various ways to reach their audience. Some, will just be in your face, dirty. Of course, some use fear, misinformation.
Yeah.
We've already said that. We understand that. They do culture wars, but humor is relatable to everyone. And the anti-woke created a lot of momentum. So they've got this energy and it gains trust. You get connected. As a matter of fact, we've talked about it, but even on TikTok, some people become celebrities on there. And these podcasters are celebrities. Don't think they're not. They're raking in millions from advertisement.
Oh, yeah.
And, Chris and I rake in millions as well. That's why we do this. But they really did bypass the gatekeepers of traditional media, party leaders and institutions, and they just rocked on.
Yeah, they really did. Ron, do me a favor. I wanted to look something up a minute ago. You have the ability to search. I'm on airplane mode over here, folks. So can you go in and look up the podcast that Kamala went on? I believe it's called Who's Your Daddy? So this is not a pod bro, but this is a female who has a very popular podcast. And I feel like, from my research, it's shown that she does a lot of like talking about body counts and, which for those who don't know, that's how many people you've slept with. So it was an interesting choice to go on to Who's Your Daddy? I mean, the title says enough, but Kamala paid that gal a crazy amount of money. And I want to see if Ron can find.
I'm on it right now that she went on, and it's a popular podcast on Spotify.
I feel like it was like $5 million to go on. And I'm bringing that up while you're looking into that. I'm bringing that up because it's wild, because we have Joe Rogan, the #1 podcast in the world, offering for Kamala to come on, and he's not charging, right? And she's turning that down due to scheduling, right? I think that's what he broke down. It was a schedule. But she'll go on Who's Your Daddy and actually pay them. I believe it was like $5 million. Not sure if you're able to find that figure.
Well, we know there was a $1 billion effort, and a lot of money is missing.
Yeah.
But
were you able to find the number or no?
No, I couldn't find the number. It just gave, the fact that she was on there. But anyway, the lessons, by the way, the takeaways, we can all learn leadership lessons from this. And one is you speak directly, not through layers. And the beauty of podcasting, and I'm going to be honest with you, Kristin and I, we appreciate, and we even got listeners in Canada. That's what I was trying to look up to see how many, Kristin, before. But here's the point. I have had some people, because we lean conservative, and we bring, I think, leadership points that nobody else is bringing from a leadership perspective. But we have our naysayers who don't like that, and they don't understand. But this is leadership, and you got to be objective as much as you can. So we've tried to just present the truth, and we don't hide how we stand, so maybe there could be some confirmation bias on our part.
I did find the number. The number. So it wasn't 5 million, it was 100,000. It did
and
say
that's
that
how people exaggerate.
Well, it said there's varying reports here, because I did find in my quick searches here that it says 100,000, but then I did find others that did say 5 million. But the one that I found repetitive, the repetitive number, which is generally what it's going to be, is $100,000.
Well,
but the point is, it could have been free to go on the largest podcast in the world.
Yes.
But it was turned down, right? So, and Joe Rogan, he takes a really objective approach. So
he does. He even said, he said, I wasn't bringing her on to attack her. I was going to try to learn more about her. But Kamala, if you run for governor of California, 1 million, call me. We'll get you on. All right.
Oh my gosh.
We have fun on this podcast, folks.
We'll definitely be objective.
All right. I want to cover some leadership topics quickly. Speak directly, not through layers. That applies to all businesses. And as much as people can, you need to speak directly to your employees. There is nothing more frustrating. Like, Kristin, I was going to joke with you when you said you wanted to write, the Canadian officials that their signage is off, or the U.S. officials. I really did want to say good luck with that. That'll go in someone low-level email box, and they'll reply to you, we received your information, thank you, and nothing will be done.
Then I'll put it on social media and take pictures of how asinine it is.
Well, you've got a big influence. You might get attention.
I don't think I'll fall to the bottom. I think someone will get me.
Yeah. But generally speaking, we all know that bureaucracy rules these big companies, and you just can't get through. You need to build community, not just an audience. And Kristin, you're really good at this. You will throw in, you'll be in a different room or a different location, and you have fans, obviously. And it's more than just an audience. And I know it's community, but it's still fans. So most of the podcasters, that's why you see these people doing a TikTok dance. Next thing you know, they get a big following, and then they're doing lives because people want to connect. And you can't connect with, back in the day, Britt Hune or any of those. You can't connect with them.
Yeah, no.
But you can go into someone's life. As a matter of fact, Kristin, this is hilarious. The first time I just saw someone talking some female live, so I click on it. I just got TikTok, and I kid you not, it's like, I don't remember. It's when I was going through that rough time of retirement, and I said I was up all hours of the night.
Yeah,
it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. And she goes, well, welcome, Ron Ward. What's on your mind?
Oh, my
And
God.
I was so
You're
embarrassed.
like,
I'm clicking. I'm trying to get off. I'm like, oh, my gosh.
That is hilarious. I have to say, for those, the build a community piece, for those who are curious about what that looks like on social media, I'll give you a little tidbit here. It's basically you have an Instagram and Facebook. There's stories, right? Stories are for that community piece.
Yeah.
Your audience is going to see your main page, your reels, your posts, and then the stories. So that's, and what is that? That is you're sharing little bits of your personal life, right? It could be you drinking coffee in the morning and you're talking about it. It could be what you're doing that day. Maybe like when I was on vacation, I'm out in the water. I'm not putting that on my main page, but that's in my stories and they expire after 24 hours. So you get a little piece of the person as like, who are they as a human being? What is part of their daily routine? What are they doing? That's that community piece. You build your following through your content, which is on your main page, right? I'm not going to gain millions of followers by talking about my morning coffee routine, right? But that's once you do start building, then you give them little bits of your personality up in your stories. So if you're trying to build something, that's how you do it.
Yeah. And finally, authenticity wins. And podcasts, we did an episode, which is really cool. It was one of my favorite of how the origins of podcasting and why it's important.
Yeah.
But podcasts were designed to be just a conversation and you're eavesdropping, like Kristin and I are having a conversation. Now we tie an educational aspect to this because it's a leadership podcast, but people get to be a fly on the wall and people just having fun and talking. So authenticity, even when it's messy, is important. And you can take that into your business. You got to be authentic and stop using the corporate jargon to mislead people or the political stuff that just, it makes me want to vomit.
Me too.
And I tried not to do that as a leader. There's sometimes you're almost forced into that because it's the only talking point that you have. But if you can avoid that, leaders, avoid it. Tell the truth about situations and be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's huge. And you just went over 3 really important ones. I love the authenticity piece because that's like what I pride myself on, is being a real authentic person. And, people can see right through the BS, right? But I want to say maybe a 4th that I would add here, and I shouldn't have said maybe. We did a whole episode on weak language, and that would have been weak. So a 4th that I would like to add here is if you ignore the power of new voices, they might just replace yours. So think about that.
Kristin, I just had a conversation with someone had told me about a manager that was not doing well. And we were talking about some issues, but I said, you just got to hang on, so forth. It turns out since that conversation, which was only maybe 3 months ago, I found out today that person has been demoted and is in the same place as the individual that talked to me. So listen, I don't wish ill will, but guess what? If you just keep making the same mistakes over and over and you're not amenable to your staff, you're not communicating effectively and stuff, you can lose the big title. And it does happen.
I appreciate those in leadership that ensure that someone who's not performing well, that they actually take the time to either terminate them or to bring them down in title, demote them, because so many of them, we've talked about this in many episodes, Ron, they promote them and get them out of their face, right? Get them out of their hair. And that's the wrong thing to do. That is a Band-Aid and it doesn't make any sense. And it sends a really bad message. So I am, whoever made that decision, bravo.
Okay, everybody, just a little final note. The Pod Bros didn't just comment on politics. They became politics, and that's leadership in its most disruptive, uncomfortable form. And truthfully, Chris and I went into this podcast to disrupt the normal status quo of leadership podcasts.
Yeah. And that's it for today's Dirty Side of Leadership episode. Hope you guys appreciated that and have a little bit more insight into the birth of the Pod Bros. Until next time, keep leading smart and don't be afraid to get your hands dirty.
Be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.